Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to UHURU for tonight's event, where we're really delighted to have with us Bongani Madondo, launching his book, Sigh the Beloved Country, and Fezokuhle Mthonti will be his discussant. I'm just going to briefly give an intro, but both of them don't need much of an introduction. Bongani is quite a well-known author, journalist, curator, filmmaker, public speaker, educator, since we saw this morning. We had a really interesting masterclass about, was it about writing? It was about writing, but more about philosophy and life. And we're just really glad to have you here right now, because what I have read of your new book is really exciting, extremely interesting prose that I think is some of the best we have in this country, let alone the continent. And then with him, who's going to be his discussant, is Fezi, who's an UHURU Masters student doing politics. Her thesis interest is in violence and xenophobia and women, if I can be so reductive. And she's also like the authoritative text on Nina Simone, as many of you know. Bongani will go for 30 or so minutes. Fezi will respond, and we'll open it to the floor. So, thank you.
Wow, that was nice. Hi guys, how are you doing? My name is Bongani, as Mika said. I'm a bit slowish because I've been up since 4 a.m. It doesn't mean you shouldn't invite me for drinks after this. But I'll pick up pace as we move. I wanted to say this. I had sort of rehearsed it. I want to step in here and say, hi, I love Queenie, I love Crumbstown and shit. And I had a long lunch with a friend, good friend that I've known for a long time, who gave me the lowdown on politics of Crumbstown. I've always known them, but I sort of recharged them. And that took a bit of a heavy thing. And I said, okay, cool. There's no place with politics. Politics is what we live, that's what we breathe, that's what we dance to. So I'm going to sort of, pick up slowly until I get into groove and we can rock and roll. Yeah? I don't know what Fezi expects me to do. I don't like to talk about my book. It's a doorstep. It's a 500-page book. And everything I wanted to say about it is in here. In 500, I cannot write a 500 pages book, and you still have something to say about it. It's like, what the fuck? Let me tell you a little thing about me, a short story. I'm from a village. I like to play this village boy thing. I'm from a village in Hammanskraal, which is 40 km, 50 km north of Pretoria. And we grew up under the Mangope Bantustan, just Mupitatswana. We were split between Pretoria and Northwest. None of them were closer to us. And when we wanted to be smart and everything, we'll say we are from Pretoria. And when we wanted other things, we'll say we're from the Northwest and stuff like that. It's a Tswana speaking area. I'm not Tswana, I'm Zulu. My folks are from KZN, Midlands, Natal, in a place called Glencoe. So we were the expatriates. In all my life, we've never fitted in anywhere. My folks didn't fit in Pretoria, and they ended up in Hammanskraal. They still didn't fit. They were the only Zulu-speaking people in the Tswana area. And I didn't fit in with them because the only language as all teenagers speak is the language of rebellion. So I've always felt like I live in the margins. And now I realize that these days, now that I'm an adult, that the margins have become fashionable. Counterculture, you can buy it over the counter. It's really counterculture. Counterculture over the counter. And the things that inspired me not inspired me, to be a writer are the very same things that now militate against my state of being a writer. I became a writer because I was extremely quiet and I hated people. I didn't want to talk, I wanted my space, big glasses, evening, like, you know. And then I had this voice that wanted to come out. And now, because I think I've got it, now I've become what I didn't want to be, like, wow. Talk. It's a byproduct of fluid fame that comes with doing things like this. You can put on there, just remove my coat. Okay. Jabulo is one of your colleagues here. And he's with my friend and colleague, a younger brother called Tiri Somunahe. He's a dope photographer and a videographer. And he's my traveling partner. He's not my protege, I don't do the protege stuff, but he's my younger brother. So they're together and then. Let's talk about this book. It took me 7 years to write this book. I'm gonna just go run through the facts, the boring stuff that you wanna ask. Just to preempt that shit and challenge you to ask interesting questions about it. So it took me 7 years to work on this, on and off. In between this, I did other things. I had a child, a son. I wrote the Brenda Fassie book and edited half of it. Well, I edited the entire book and I wrote half of it. I traveled. I got lost in research fields in Paris, looking for the spirit of James Baldwin. I became poor. I lost an apartment. I reclaimed something, but I kept at it. Each and every time I was not writing it, I felt like I'm getting mad. Life was very stressful. And I needed something to bring me back. This book is highly deceptive, I think. It looks like, oh, it's a collection of essays, so cool, so funky, but it's not. All the stories that you see here, all the chapters that you read about here, were carefully curated to talk to each other, even if they cover disparate subjects. The story at the heart, the core of this book, is South Africa. This is an attempt of, dude, to open that, let me put it to work. When open it and just line up the books nice, make them look good, sort of decorative. Okay. Just remove the coat, do a bit of work. So all the stories are about South Africa. At core, there's a running thread. There's a running thread in this book. And this book is South Africa. But beyond South Africa, I mean, I don't want to tell you that because I don't want to preempt it. But it's sort of, there's this thing that I call black magic. That is key. It's almost in everything, in everyone, in all the pieces. There are close to 50 pieces here. Serious chapters. The other chapter is 20,000 words. Smart people says it's 4 books in one. I'm like, maybe not. I don't care. I wanted to do it this way. It is intensely personal project. I wanted to make sure that once I'm done with it, I don't want to fuck around with the essay form anymore. I've been working on it for like close to 10 years. And I was like, I know people are into essay form, Sadie Smith and that kind of shit. Let them do that. I'm out of it. So I wanted to be as experimental as possible. But not only that, I wanted to see if the essay form can speak to people without the fanciness, in the most direct and simple language as well. Doesn't mean I've always, achieved that. I'm going to read here. I was going to read some chapter here, and it's 5 o'clock on a Friday night. Don't want people to sleep. I would seriously encourage you guys to buy the book if you really, really want to get the chapters. But I will just read at the back. Okay? Yeah. This is what my publisher wrote. The publisher says, Sigh the Beloved Country is a saucy stew of literary performance that showcases essays, memoirs, the interview as an art form, profile as a form of theatrical set piece, travelogues, political epistles, and excursions into fantasy and fiction. It speaks to disparate genres with the same spirit as it addresses a country no longer at ease with itself. At times explosive, funny, irascible, memoiristic, and epic in scope, it is also cozy and personal for its obsession with miniature. Whether at home with subversive artists in city's back alleys, or enjoying himself at the invite-only black tax balls, inside the beloved country, the culture critic morphs into a storyteller, eavesdropper, and something of a traveling jester throughout the land to share stories of his prophets, beauty, and tragic figures. Madondo is at his finest, tackling themes as disparate as race and its isms, the new bourgeois, the idea of God, nascent black punk culture, and black magic. Simultaneously, a synopsis and a critique of a country, Sigh the Beloved Country, comes out like a soul blast. It also drops on the 10th anniversary of his debut, Hot Tide, which was more concerned with the politics of greeds, what Madondo now refers to as expensive craft. With its inbuilt shrug, Sigh is less a fanboy book, enamored with hipsters, and more of an adult lover and critic of a country in conversation with its people. The so-called ordinary folks, the wealthy, the beautiful, the deranged, and the truly genius, they are all people of the South. Synopsis of what this book is about. Fezi, I'm so loath to tell people what's inside, because people can find it. It's got, it has close to 10 books within itself, and then afterward. It's got a section on homage, where I give love to some of the literary figures Towers who have influenced me. Some, not all of them. It's got a section on radicals in literature called Niggas Are Scared of the Revolution. It's got a section that was inspired by Salman Rushdie's work, Imaginary Homelands. Have you guys read that book, the collection of essays? It's so... Sorry, I'm from the States, so we're going to have to deal with the F word. It's got a section called Excuse Me While I Touch the Sky, inspired by Jimi Hendrix. And it's got a section called They Done Put a Spell on Me. I can see someone smiling. It's got a section that really touched me intensely. It's called The Believers. This section, I'm trying to deal with the idea of faith, spirituality, God. What is belief and what does it do to us? Elegance, and it starts with race, of course. You cannot not start with race. And it's got a section called New Money, which touches on specifically black new money. And it doesn't necessarily confine it to that. It does open up spaces that identifies whiteness and white new money as part of the new money class culture. Oscar Pistorius is a prime example of new money. In league with the Kenny Kunenes of this world. And that's as much as I can say about the book. If I say anything more than that, I'll just get into the PR mode. Listen, if I didn't write this book, I would have bought 10 copies. It's a fucking brilliant book. I mean, it almost killed me working on it. So many times I wanted to let it go. Like, I can't do this. Because one thing that I was trying to release, escape is not the word, free the essay form from journalism. I've been a journalist for close to 15 to 20 years, and it has done so many wonders to me. But it ultimately became very boring, and it can only do so much, and it's not good for writing. So I wanted to release myself and the form of reporting and of telling people stories from journalism towards the scholarly work, the academic work, but not without the boring, I'm sorry Michael and everyone else, without the boring over-citation and all the shit and self-perpetuating stuff that the academy loves about itself, quoting each other's friends and all that, and making themselves feel good, getting grants and all that shit. I didn't want it. I wanted something in between. I can speak to both. the serious and the street. In essence, if you haven't picked it up, my grounding as a theorist is rock and roll. And not only rock and roll as music, but rock and roll is an impulse to disrupt. Thank you so much.
It's so weird to see you with such a calm energy. I don't know how to respond to it a little bit.
Maybe I should play this.
Yeah, maybe you should. Thank you so much. I just want to honor the book, and I just because I don't know if I'm being controversial at all by saying this, but I don't think that South Africa has a lot of public intellectuals. I don't even know what that word means in very many ways. But I don't think a lot of people write well. And then when you do find the few that write well, which in my opinion, you are one. I was at your book launch.
I'm sure we'll take you far, baby.
I was at your launch in Johannesburg, and I remember Panache saying, you know, you overwrite, and I was like, I really don't believe that at all, because I think, I think not enough people take the form, right? Take words seriously, take ideas seriously, and I think that you are one of the few people that do. And so I'm gonna pose a couple of questions. Pose a couple of questions just because, so my initial instinct when I first saw this book, when I first read this book, I was like, of course I'm going to talk about Nina Simone and Miriam Makeba, and of course I'm going to speak about Zahara, because that's also a part of this conversation. Of course I'm going to talk about all the sort of musical influences, and for me, how you allow music and musicality, and particularly black women, to be what Grant Farrell calls vernacular intellectuals, which is that they can just create, and they are inherently tied to the politics and create politics in very many ways, and both politics with a small p and politics with a big P. And of course, my initial instinct was to just go to Nina Simone and have that conversation, but I think your book is a lot more than that, right? So, of course, your history in Rolling Stones, and of course, a Not Your Weekend special. A lot of us that have come to your work a little bit later imagine you as a musical journalist. But I do remember your piece in the Mail and Guardian where you were talking about your middle class parents and living in a world of books as a black child. And I so identified with that because often the narrative, particularly for black life, black people, is that we're incredibly infantile or uneducated, or there are no books that exist at home. And that's not to say that lots of books exist in black people's houses. It's not to say that lots of books don't exist in black people's houses. It's just to say that it was a narrative that complicated a lot of the assumptions. But I would like to read part of your work because I think your prose is gorgeous. And I think it does things that you're doing a lot of work, and I want to talk a little bit about what you were talking here about new money. So I want to talk about the chapter on Oscar Pistorius, and then I want to talk about the chapter with Jub Jub. And I think these ideas really, particularly on this campus, particularly in the moment that we're in South Africa and the world over, have a lot of resonance. So the first one is on page 82. So he writes, so this is after he kind of has a conversation about Oscar Pistorius and thinking about who he was, what he was to our imagination, what he meant for South Africans. But there's something that just pulls me to this section. He says, just like Jub Jub, the fallen hip-hop brat now in dungeon for knocking off school children in a drug-fueled drag race one summer in Soweto, Mr. Pistorius is something of a little Lord Fauntleroy. He is also a product of the pugnacious tabloid age. Regardless of the fact that he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, as the papers do not tire of reminding us, his is the story of new money. And because it is related to a specific activity in which its main players toil hard as opposed to making boodles of dash out of mining shares, this is an altogether different brand of new money. This is the story of gladiatorial money. This is a pay-per-view new money crowded by multi-millionaire teenagers nursing bad cases of acne. In this, Oscar is one of the later day masters of the universe. And in this universe, the unspoken wisdom is fuck Gordon Gekko. Yeah, fuck Gordon Gekko, and instead hug your sports agent, the heir to the excesses of the gilded age of old money. What struck me as odd and sad is that throughout this, our eyes were trained on the bullet in the chamber. It felt as though Reba didn't matter as much. We treated her with mild irritation, if not condescension. We felt shame about what had happened to her, the gruesomeness of it, but not really for her. Although we were too sly to call her names, it was as though the silent jibe we shared, only in private, was that of another gold digger. But because her name evokes painful truths, we can never ever speak about Reba's name or what that name has come to embody, the soul of the present invisible. It is also emblematic of the narrative of violence in this country. The statistics of gun violence in this country are women, much gawked at and nevertheless the world's ultimate present invisibles. But there was never a way of getting around the fact that an unarmed Reba Steenkamp was mistakenly or otherwise pumped full of lead from the chamber of a fatal instrument of a gun by a gun-obsessed man-child. Here's a woman, apparently hopelessly in love, shot several times by her lover, the lord of the manor in a gated community full of millionaires just like him. Looking back on the tragedy of St. Valentine's Day, no words suffice to express the collective shock of the nation, the horror. And then I'd just like to read something that, to me, reminds me a lot of the work of Amy Césaire and the work of Frantz Fanon and the work of Ralph Ellison. And I think you're in great company when you can
Totally flattered, I must tell you.
imagine those kinds of people. But you say, fear is never not real.
Oh, shit.
Real fear is not just a simple notion of phobia. It issues out of a hopeless soul. It is born out of experience, out of history, out of the collective psyche. That is what the seminal hip-hop band Public Enemy was referring to in their late 90s album, Fear of a Black Planet. This is the constructed boogeyman, the intruder in white South Africa's imagination. The intruder no one gives a toss about when he, always he, meaning someone exactly fitting my racial and gender profile, and in the absence of evidence, he could be me. When I break into people's houses, rob them on their way home from working in gated mansions of the rich, when I rape, loot, and maim the black innocent children, when I am menaced, and I am menaced by those blacks like me, no one cares when I am stopped in the daytime in the northern suburb. I've lived in for 15 years and asked, what are you doing here? Who's your boss? No one dares even look when the police strip me naked in Cape Town, in Thokoza, in Tembisa, in Khayelitsha, and humiliate me in broad daylight. But when I enter and exit the white man's head, media, dinner, chat, and in this instance, the courts of the law, as though they are all linked to a theatrical stage where an epic Greek tragedy is currently unfolding, you all remember to name me, the Swart Gevaar. I can't imagine how much tossing and turning Ralph Ellison, the great Negro, author of Invisible Man, is doing in his grave. As for the enormity of the trial coming to an end next Monday, the 13th, last time I checked, some in the media had already started labeling this the trial of the century. It might as well be OJ and the cold-blooded blonde were so last century, right? At a minor but not less disheartening and disgusting level, simply because a person died that night, too, the story evokes in our hearts the ominous, if unfinished, Duani murder case we will certainly migrate to with glee. Bloods are over. And so I just want to think a little bit about what, for me, The Invisible Man does with Ralph Ellison, which I think you also managed to achieve in this book, which is the idea of the palimpsest, right? Or I think I wrote here, Robert Nixon talks about the palimpsest, and he writes about a synchronous conflation or superimposition of multiple historical periods upon the present, right? Because nothing about these stories are new, but they are stories that we know. So the Swart Gevaar is a story that we know. The black body as a problem body is something that we know. The black man as a problem body is something that we know, that we are aware of, and that's a global story. But in as much as it's an old story, it's an incredibly new story. It's one that is a bit too scary because it's a feature of our reality. It's a story that we have to raise our children and our sisters and our cousins and our people with, right? And I want to appreciate what you've done here with the word palimpsest, or rather what I think you've done to create a palimpsestic work. But I'm interested in what your conception of liberalism is, and I told you I was going to ask you this. Because in the book and in general, Bongani, you identify as a liberal radical humanist. And I think those are nice words, but I don't think that those words actually reflect one another or can be thought of in conversation with one another. Partly because I think, and I'm thinking of Edward Lucerdo's work when he's thinking about the underside of liberalism, and he's thinking about that liberalism actually creates this idea of profane and sacred spaces. So this is a sacred space. The university is often imagined as a sacred space, and then bodies that are irreconcilable to that sacredness are sort of thrown to a different place. So in very many ways, liberalism also creates the Manichaean city that Frantz Fanon speaks about. So parts of it are light, parts of it are dark. It's the same with capitalism. Capitalism creates profane spaces, creates dirt, creates this, and creates incredibly beautiful spaces, and a particular few people can be in those sacred spaces. So every time I think about Nina Simone, Miriam Makeba, Busim Shongo, Zahara, Brenda, Johnny Michelle, even because this book is initially meant to be what's this shit about?
Oh yeah,
Bob Dylan. Right, I don't think those people are liberal, or I don't think that their oeuvre should take us into liberalism.
Can I engage you? Can I try to say something?
Sure.
I have a question because like you build it, you kind of build my ego so much, and then you come like, what is this thing with you know? and you're serious. I mean, you know what? I'm a bit old school. I grew up in Hammanskraal, so I'm so politically incorrect. So when I say something, say maybe I compliment you, don't ever think that I'm condescending. I really mean it. I just think that I way of putting it. But you're well read. You're smart. You're hot. When you're talking about palimpsests, I think of Gore Vidal. You know, have you read Gore Vidal?
Seen in reference lists.
Yeah. Please read him. He's an old white gay man, and he's fine in his old white gayness. Read him. It's like pure beauty, a serious thinker. I'm mentioning this because I know part of this, generation of radicals, they don't read white people, that kind of shit. I understand that, but yeah, he's somebody to read. And completely, I mean, listen, I'm not going to take ownership of the Mrs. and all this. Those are big. I'm like, what the fuck am I? We put in the same list. But hey, build up my, when I live here, my head will be so huge and I can't pass through here. Because you've sort of, given me all these things. And I feel good about it. Really, really feel good. I know I don't deserve half of it, but I feel good. When you're talking about Invisible Men, I'm thinking of Toni Morrison's. Man, sometimes people who are really, really, really great thinkers can be beautifully bitchy as well. When she said about Richard Ellison's, Ralph Ellison's work, he says invisible to who? That was Toni Morrison. He says invisible man, but invisible to who? The charge laid within that was that Ralph was writing to and for white audiences. And that's what Toni Morrison's reading of it. I know that's not your question, but I'm getting there. Bell Hooks said the same about Ta-Nehisi Coates, like a month ago. Say, beautiful book and everything, but you're writing with the whiteness at the back of your head. And you're trying to. At some point, I I remember not having read these smart, beautiful people and how they wrestle with whiteness, but I remember somebody asked me about writing, and I said, it's possible. It's possible that subconsciously, without meaning to, because if you do it intentionally, that's cynicism. But without meaning to, most of us writers, black writers, are essentially writing for white audiences. And by that, I'm not talking about in a cynical sense whereby you craft your stuff to resonate with white politics or whiteness. But at the almost, it's at a very subconscious level, even the choice of language. But we'll pass that to Ngoki language because I don't want us to get gripped in why do you use English language, colonial language. I think that's 1960s debate. But at heart, most of us, consciously or subconsciously, we're writing for white people, I think. And it's something that if we are honest enough, we'll agree that the process of writing, as a black person, but for everyone, it's a process of bringing yourself into crisis and develop, so it poses those existential challenges. It doesn't then mean because you're writing for them, you want them to agree with you, but you're aware that they buy books, they control the bookstores and everything. And the very notion of a book as it is still alien to certain people, whether it's because it's expensive or whatever, a whole lot of things. And so somehow, most of us, even thinkers, and I think it happens in the universities as well, and you find it with some of the sharpest radical black voices, whether towards embrace or whether total rejection away from whiteness, the center, the pillar is whiteness is the issue. And it disturbs us at the bigger level, and at a huge level, whether we want to embrace it and want it to take us serious at its at the same level, or whether we want to totally reject it as not a space that should determine our stories. But the issue is, it is the central figure. So whiteness in the last 500 years and more has been the central figure, has been one thing that loomed large in black minds and black psychology and black psyche reality. And it is seriously possible that whiteness could be the invention of black people. So one of the essays that I didn't include there spoke about there should be, listen, we'll talk about this liberal thing, let's just get the shit out. One of the essays that I didn't include, I might include for the American release of this, is that ultimately, and it can't be any sooner, ultimately whiteness must fall, whiteness must go. But as soon as, this is my theory, as soon as, and I don't know if there should be a timeline or this thing should work parallel, but as soon as whiteness falls, blackness must soon follow. Or our notions of blackness as we know it. Fractured, coherent, stemming out of anger, pride, or nationalisms. The concept of blackness as we know it must also fall. Because whiteness has created, blackness has created whiteness, and whiteness has created blackness in return. There are the two mirror images of each other, and both of them are old, useless concepts. That doesn't necessarily mean there's no privilege. And privilege is stored within whiteness. So the sooner we deal with whiteness as a side of imagined intelligence, standards, so-called civilization and all that, the sooner we deal with it. And we need white people to engage on that within themselves as we deal with it. So there could be parallel struggles.